The EcmaScript specification has a long history of being hard to understand. Developers don't get it. What does it mean? Well, they don't even read it. That's a problem because they don't understand the underlying language that they're using. That's bad. Now, I've long since pointed out to Brendan Eich the problems with that, and it still persists. It's gotten better. Now we at least have the spec in an HTML document, so people are going to be more likely to read it. We still have bad, vague descriptions of things in the spec. Iteration after iteration after iteration. And then that's a fact. These things are not clearly defined or not well enough defined to be understood by web developers. That's a problem. In contrast to, as I've long pointed out for over decades, the Java language specification, which is read by developers. Now, I know that there's a difference in the audience, but that doesn't mean that you can't write things in a way that can be reasonably understood by the people who are using the language. You can, and there's good reason to do so. Now, if you're going to write things in the language as little ad hoc notes, as appendices, make them clear to the people who are going to be reading them. Make it easy to consume. If you don't do that, you are the one who is not being nice. You are the one who is not being nice to every web developer who is making the genuine and sincere effort to expend their own energy in reading the specification to try to understand what the hell the language is supposed to do. And you're going to cancel the person who points that out because your feelings are hurt? Well, if you don't like this video and your feelings are hurt, I suggest you close your browser. The facts don't care about your feelings. The specification is, in my subjective opinion, and it is a fact that that is my opinion, I will state for the record that it is a fact, a subjective fact, that most dogs prefer cat food. It's not the opinion of the dog, it's the fact that the dog prefers. You put the dog food, you put the cat food, that's what the dog will choose. They'll choose the cat food most of the time. And it is a subjective fact that I believe that particular part of the specification is asinine. To put it in there to say over and over again, here's the part in strict mode. Now, if you're in strict mode, and also, well, if you're in strict mode, if it's necessary, then explain why I'm wrong for saying that it's asinine. If it's justifiable, if it's like, well, it's a good idea to remind them, or we were providing contrast because we said that it's when these are considerations for strict mode, and then we provided some examples that were in non-strict mode, but just to remind the reader that they were in strict mode for this counter examples. Or if there's some other reason why it has to be in there again and again and again and again and again, ad nauseum, tell me why. Explain why. Change my view. And if you don't want to do that, that shows that you don't care about my feelings. You only care about your feelings. You don't care about the reader at all. You only care about the author. That's you. That's the problem. The problem is not me. The problem is your inconsideration, your selfishness, your self-centered fixation on your own personal subjective feelings. I'm pointing out problems in the spec. I want to make it a little better so that other web developers will read it, so that I can join a project, and if the project requires 20,000 lines of code, then we can have 20,000 lines of code, not 500,000 lines of React.js and everything else, and a long bug list, and asynchronous errors that nobody else can figure out, and I get stuck working on day after day after day. Because the people who were doing the hiring didn't understand the language, so they hired people who didn't understand the language, and the people who didn't understand the language decided to implement their project with React or Angular or one of these other general-purpose libraries that are going to sit at the core of the application until the library becomes defunct, like Dojo Toolkit, like Prototype.js, like the older version of Angular, like the YUI library. You go to work on Wednesday, and you're using a JavaScript library at the core of your app. You go to work on Thursday. Turns out that that library is no longer being maintained by the team. You now have legacy code at the core of your app. I've been on projects like that. A lot of people have. It costs a lot of money. Why? Well, because people don't read the spec. And why don't they read the spec? Because it's not very well written. And why isn't it very well written? Because nobody wants to read it and provide critical feedback to it. And the moment somebody does, you have to get offended and your feelings get hurt and you have to cancel them and shake the community guidelines at them like a little net nanny and try to cancel them. Because why? Because you didn't want to make things better. Because you had a negative self-centered fixation on your own personal feelings. That's the problem. That's what needs to change. Your attitude is the problem. Mine isn't.